fusing architecture, storytelling, and technology. This is Fusion, the Electrosonic podcast, breaking down the art of engineering and creating lasting experiences through Pro AV. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fusion, an Electrosonic podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B. And folks, thanks so much for joining us on another episode of the show. We appreciate you joining us for some broader thought leadership here from the attractions and AV industries. As we explore today's conversation, make sure that you're heading to our website, electrosonic.com. Again, electrosonic.com. For more information on our solutions and services and for more Electrosonic content. And if you want more episodes of Fusion, make sure that you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just hit that subscribe button and you'll have a full catalog of previous conversations, plus notifications when we drop new ones. So for today's episode of the show, we're so fortunate to have two well-respected guests in the themed entertainment industry for a virtual fireside chat of sorts. We'll of course explore some of the larger trends that are shaping the industry that we've explored on the show before, namely theme park trends, the evolution of park design and attraction technology, and some expectations around technology and operations post-COVID. But maybe more importantly, what we're wanting to do is highlight a broader theme, and that theme being the power of collaboration in our industry, and how partnerships, whether that's person to person, company to company, or industry to industry, have shaped themed entertainment for the better, and better understanding how collaboration is going to play a critical role in shaping the future of the industry, especially in a post-COVID context. So, joining us to share their insights on the topic are our two thought leaders. We'll go down the line here, starting with Les Hill, Senior Account Manager at Electrosonic. Les, great to have you on. How you doing?
Doing great. Nice to be here. Nice to talk to Craig at long last.
Yes, real pleasure getting to have you on, and alongside Craig, who let's go ahead and introduce as well. We're joined by Craig Hanna, co-founder and chief creative officer at Thinkwell Group. Craig, great to have you on as well. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Again, pleasure chatting with both of you. What I want to do first is, I hyped y'all both up, but I want to make sure I deliver on that hype and break down why your perspectives are so engaging today. So we're going to share with our audience some of the storied and detailed perspectives that you're both bringing to the conversation. So I'm going to start with a question for each of y'all. Craig, we'll start with you first. So for some context on Craig. Craig, you have 30 years of experience leading creative development for destinations around the world. At Thinkwell, you've overseen and led creative direction on renowned projects like Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi, Warner Brothers Studio Tour London, the making of Harry Potter, Ski Dubai, and Ferrari World Abu Dhabi. Some really, really huge big name projects. You also spent 6 years as Director of Attraction Development for Universal Studios. So, again, your utility belt of experience is packed. So I'm curious how you see the use of well-known IP, which you've worked on extensively for themed attractions, how you see that aspect of this world changing. Are there any shifts to how studios like Warner Brothers, for example, leverage IP in their parks, or how smaller parks get IP leased out to them? So again, break down any of those shifts, and if so, what has been the impact of those shifts?
Sure, happy to. I think, first of all, there's always this dichotomy between creating an attraction where you're creating the story whole cloth from scratch versus an IP. And some people believe the unfettered creativity, the originality of the idea coming from a non-IP attraction gives you the freedom to explore the broadest possible horizons of your concept. Whereas with the IP, you're working within the bounds of that existing intellectual property and need to stay within that milieu of that IP. And we find, as experts working with IP, that telling those stories within those confines actually can be more creatively challenging, and therefore forcing you to work your creative muscle to solve a problem better and more interestingly. At Universal, our motto is always to take the IP, give people what they expect, and then go one step further. you want to exceed their expectations. And so I always called it version 1.5. It was not the original film, it was something a little beyond the film when we developed attractions. From a theme park owner and operator standpoint, I should say, the great thing about having an IP-based attraction is you have millions and millions of dollars of marketing behind your attraction long before you even open the door, because fans and people around the world are already familiar with these IP. And so there's a baked in knowledge as to what you have to offer before you even offer it. That short story of getting to that saves a lot of energy, time, marketing money, and communications in order to sell people on what the new thing is you're trying to do. And the big guys have their own IP, right? Disney and Universal have their own IP. Other people need to license it. And I think over the years, there's been a real fear that that cost is so prohibitive that they don't even want to begin. But I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, we have worked with a lot of IP holders that are eager to get their properties into location-based entertainment projects. And that cost of entry is not as complex as many people think it was or should be in their minds.
I appreciate all that insight, Craig, and especially your take that IP to some degree actually poses a bigger creative challenge. I don't think that would be everyone's first thought. I think IP often carries a lot of sort of supposed baked in creativity or options for what to do with characters or what to do with an existing world. But yeah, to your point, to really make that stand out and to make it live up to expectations as well around the IP, I think takes another layer of creativity and work that you've definitely honed over your 30 years. So thanks for that insight. We'll dig into that a little more later.
Let me ask Craig a question. It seems that IP is a common thread that runs through the majority of the projects that Craig and Thinkwell are working on. So I'm curious about the challenges that you run into with IP holders, and specifically, what's it like to work with the richest lady in the UK?
Well, I mean, when you're working on any multi-billion-dollar franchise, there's a lot of consideration in what you're doing, and so there are a lot of people that are going to be involved in reviewing that to make sure that you're on target. And that is a process that we're very familiar with that goes all the way back to Thinkwell's very first project, which was a Jurassic Park project, and a project that we worked on with Electrosonic. And that was almost 20 years ago now. And that project was a touring, educational, Jurassic Park themed experience. It played in Yoyogi Park, and 1 million people in Japan went through that in 6 months. So it was incredibly successful. But we had to work with some very big names in order to get the approvals, make sure that our dinosaurs were all on model, make sure that everything was as on brand to that IP as possible. So it's always a real challenge. It requires a lot of diligence and a lot of detail, and it's something that we're just very, very familiar with. And I would say that all began back in my Universal days, knowing that we had to make sure that we appeased and brought comfort to the IP holder, that we knew what we were doing, and made them feel comfortable that we could get it done.
I remember actually prior to the Jurassic tour, when we were both at iWorks, we would lease IP. For instance, there was an Aliens attraction we did, and then much later there was a SpongeBob attraction, and probably a lot more in between that. So where we were able to license those film properties for the movies that we leased out to the various sites.
Right. Yeah. And it's just working with lots of people and juggling all of those different brands and different IP holders, often at the same time. It can be a lot.
Les, I want to pivot your way with a question about your background as well, just to keep our audience informed. You also bring decades of experience to the industry, more specifically in technological problem solving and creative vision for the themed attractions industry. You've worked in entertainment with companies like Ride and Show Engineering, iWorks Entertainment, Universal Studios, Jack Morton Production, and Walt Disney Imagineering. You've done everything from designing, project managing, installing, even operating cutting-edge attractions. So really what stood out to me as I was researching you and your background is just how hands-on you've been with these attractions over the years. So I'm curious how you've seen the technical expectations around themed attractions shift. Do you think they've shifted for the better? Have they gotten harder in any way? Basically, break down your relationship and experience bringing that hands-on approach to the industry and how things have changed in your opinion, whether for better or for worse.
So interestingly, Daniel, we didn't mention at the outset that in many of those companies, Craig and I worked together. So at Ride and Show, at iWorks, at Universal, and Jack Morton. And because we lived in the same neighborhood, we carpooled together. So we had too many hours together during those years.
And then when Les went to work for Electrosonic, my office was just down the road in Burbank, and we continued to commute. We commuted for 23 years off and on.
That is a storied carpool history. I'm curious how many albums you went through in your day through those commutes.
We talked the whole time.
Wow, love it.
We actually convinced the people at iWorks that we had our own radio program because this was the early days, right? And Craig, always being a first adopter, had a car phone. And in those days, you had a little antenna that you stuck on your car roof. And so we convinced everyone that we were a radio station, and we were broadcasting from the car.
Days before podcasts, and now look at you on a podcast.
And now look at us, indeed, amazing. Yeah. So thanks for the great introduction. I would say that it costs a lot of money to take a family of 4 to the theme park for the day, and no one is doing that for the technology. They don't care about things like frame rate and resolution and foot lamberts, not like we do, of course. But to create a powerful, engaging, and memorable experience, it's all about the story, and I think story is a common thread, just like IP, like we've mentioned already. Story is a big deal, and the technology that the engineers at Electrosonic implement is really just a tool that the creative teams like Craig and Thinkwell use to drive the story, and they fuse the technology into the architecture and the scenery and all of the other elements in the attraction.
So you brought this up yourself, Les, but you've both collaborated several times, and now we've got bigger insight, have carpooled for 20 plus years during your years crossover in the industry. So, just for a little more fun context here, can you both share what you would say is your favorite project that you've worked on together, but really hone in on that why, right? What stands out about said project and, some of the larger trends we're going to be talking about today?
Well, for me, I would go back to the fact that both Les and I were on the product development team for the Turbo Tour Theater, which is probably one of the most installed simulation theater products in the world. And this was probably late 80s, 1990, somewhere around there. And at the time, Star Tours was the big deal. And there were a few other products out there that were trying to cash in on that market as well. And no one knew what they were doing. We were all making it up as we went. And so it was a lot of fun to work with Les because of his product development and engineering background, to be able to try to define what that product would be, working with our bosses at the time, the owners at iWorks, to create something that was going to be really cool. And I was on sort of the marketing client side, and Les was on the engineering product fabrication side. And it was a pretty fun, heady, exciting time.
I remember that we had just almost finished product development, and the intention was that we were going to bring this Turbo Tour hydraulic motion base to the Dallas trade show. And we almost got it working perfectly. And we missed the transportation to take us from LA to Dallas. And I ended up renting a U-Haul truck and loading the equipment on the truck and driving it to Dallas just in time for the installation of the trade show. And Craig and I, we'd never done trade shows before. Now we're pretty old hands at it, but it was kind of fun working a trade show and not knowing the rules relative to the Teamsters unions and things like that. So we quickly learned they didn't appreciate us jumping on their forklift and driving off with it and installing our booth and all things like that. It was quite an experience, but I think we made a sale, so it all worked out in the end. I would like to just do a personal one. You see, in those early days, we were carpooling, and I don't know if you know the 210 freeway, Daniel, but it makes for quite a long day. And at the time, I was single, so we decided that I needed to get out and date. So during one of these long drives, we hatched this dating plan for me. And now remember that technology was not as sophisticated then. And so we decided to use the penny saver newspaper approach. And I guess I was a cheap dater. So one day we wrote a script for the ad that we put in the paper. And then we wrote the script for the answering machine message that played back when you responded to the ad. Well, I was so excited to get home the day after the ad appeared in the paper, and was thrilled to see that my answering machine was blinking away like crazy to signal that I had received messages. Unfortunately, the messages were a lot of heavy breathing from someone with a voice that was eerily familiar. They were all from Craig.
Oh, yeah. Prank of the century. Wow, I love that. I mean, it's just fun to hear y'all's storied history, because clearly it extends beyond just the industry. But you know, that friendship obviously informs and guides the kind of collaboration you do on your work as well. And we're going to carry that energy into the rest of our conversation here. So what I want to do now is turn from, looking back at y'all's career and how it informs your perspectives to getting a little more timely. So I want to look at some of the newest projects that are being launched today and intersect those with conversations around collaboration, technology, and the future of the industry. So let's turn to Nintendo World, for example, and its emphasis on park-wide interactivity for basically all of its various attractions. With its investment in interconnected technologies and a very creative strategic vision for every touch point across the park, can you give our audience some updates on how successful Nintendo World has or hasn't been? What is working well at the installation? What isn't? And why? Break down sort of that overview for us.
Sure. Super Nintendo World was a project that we've worked on for a number of years here at Electrosonic. It opened in Osaka earlier this year after being stalled by COVID. I understand it's currently closed, and probably only a few people in the US have actually seen it in person because of travel restrictions. So what I know about it and can speak to is what I've seen on YouTube and by reading reviews. It's amazing. There are 2 attractions, the Mario Kart and Yoshi's Adventure. There's all of the usual themed food and merchandise, character meet and greets, and just tons of interactivity. The Mario Kart attraction that we were primarily involved with blends classic dark ride gags with video game characters and other elements that are superimposed on AR goggles. And Daniel, I'm from the Atari video game generation, so playing Centipede and the like. But just this Christmas, we visited our grandkids in LA, and they got a Nintendo Switch from Santa. And I don't know if you can believe this, but it's a lot of fun getting your butt kicked by 7 and 8-year-old girls. Yeah. But it is. It brings you.
It's definitely grounding,
isn't it? It brings you back to earth. Yeah. But I did. We played the Mario Kart ride, and from what I see, the videos accurately represent the video game. It is a lot of fun, and I can see that there is, not that I know, there is room for expansion with all of the other characters from the Nintendo universe. It's going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing it either in person in Osaka or hopefully when it opens up in Hollywood, which I think is later this year.
Craig, I want to bring you into the conversation. Would love just your thoughts in general to that same question, but maybe even just to get more specific. Let's bring in the IP use. Do you see Nintendo World doing anything particularly unique with its, highly profitable IP? And I mean, that's an understatement, right? We're dealing with some of the most recognizable IP out there today. How are they leveraging their IP? And do you think that says anything about the future of IP use or just some strategies that are working well for today's attractions industry?
The really smart thing Universal has done with Nintendo is taking what they've learned on creating immersive lands, which really began with Harry Potter in terms of highly immersive lands, and bringing that to bear on Nintendo. Everywhere you turn and look, there's something moving. There's something happening that you can interact with. And certainly a holy grail for the industry has been to allow the guest the opportunity to interact with the environment and to interact with the attractions in a more meaningful way than we have been able to do in the past. At Thinkwell, we believe that you're never going to fight against the person's cell phone. A lot of people believe that, when you're in a theme park, you should keep your phone in your pocket and focus on the experience. And that's just never going to happen. So we have to lean into people's devices and figure out a way to utilize those devices as part of the experience. And Nintendo's done a really, really great job of that. But in the future, I think we will see even more of that. There are hints, many hints over the years with Disney and testing various technologies for interactivity in parks and attractions. Certainly, Galaxy's Edge with their app has created an opportunity for people to interact with the environment. And then as we look at what's going on with the Avengers Campus, another level of interactivity where they're bringing in monetization with product that interacts with the ride. All of this is definitely the direction that things are going to be going in the future.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that phone point because, yeah, that does seem to be the prevailing sort of casual mainstream commentary on physical in-person experiences and how the end user should relate to their device, even though a lot of just sort of casual experiences too. I'd say, the broader retail shopping experience or hospitality experience often emphasize you can check in with your phone or you can swipe your phone to, do some VR or, try on a new piece of clothes in the smart mirror in front of you. It still feels like a lot of the experience innovation happens less connected to the device, right? And happens more with engaging AV or something that is less tangible, right? Something a little more esoteric and high level that sticks and imprints with the customer. So I'm curious how you see those two worlds combining to create a strategic vision around building impactful experiences for the attractions industry moving forward. So again, just how you see mobile devices and that emphasis on let's use the device as a tool that enhances the experience rather than, I'm not sure, the opposite of that, right? So just kind of break down how you see that dynamic unfolding in positive ways and give us some strategies that you think are working.
Absolutely. Clearly, you can't, engage with your phone when you're on a dynamic moving ride because that's not safe. But in terms of walking around in the environment, walking around in the queue, you can start to envision different ways that you could use the phone to engage, particularly in lines, playing games with the environment, using AR and other things to allow people to engage with that queue in a fun way and with other guests so that they can participate in something that keeps them entertained and keeps them moving. Those are things that I think people are trying out. They're happening in different ways already. People are productizing this, and you can find this sort of thing at IAAPA. We are working on a project right now where AR is going to be a key component of that experience when it opens in 2023. And guests will be able to take their device and be able to use it in the environment to see enhanced components of that environment that bring that environment to life, animate that environment, and interact with the guest as they move through the experience. And then, of course, the added benefit of that is you'll be able to capture some of those moments and share them on social media. And so this is a huge direction forward, and it's just going to be something that we will all expect to have the ability to do as we go through any theme park experience in the future.
Yeah, the Nintendo world utilizes what they call a power band, and from what you read in the press, it ups the level of the experience by 50%. It enables you to collect coins and high scores and interact with the variety of interactive elements in Super Nintendo World. So I can see that as another, it's about a $30 buy. So it's another Harry Potter wizard's wand, if you will.
And in conversations I've had with professionals in other industries, again, like retail and hospitality, sporting venues as well, the power band is something that a lot of professionals are almost begging, clamoring for the rest of the industry to adopt and see the value in, whereas normally those industries are leaning into, let's leverage the phone, let's leverage the existing technology the end user already has, rather than offer something like hey, pop on this band, and this now enables you to interact with every single one of the touch points in our experience. I think some companies see that as an investment into just another disposable or something that will in the long term not pan out, when we could leverage the piece of hardware in the end user's pocket. But I think to your point, the power band and how it enables that seamless, frictionless experience, I think allows for more unique storytelling, right? Because you can engage with it without even really thinking about it as an end user. And so I'm curious if technology, because we seem to be landing back at how technology is really elevating the storytelling experience. Do you see tech being sort of the operative factor here for what has evolved park design most acutely during both of your tenures in the industry? Or would you say that there's a deeper or maybe parallel sort of storytelling innovation or relationship with how professionals deal with building stories in these theme parks that has also grown or been the main factor for change in park design? I guess break down which dynamic you think is really shaping the industry the most and why.
I'll start. Technology is always a means to an end. It's never the starting point. And, oftentimes there are many great experiences that the technology is so embedded into the experience that no one ever walks out the door saying, that was an amazing technological achievement. They say, what a great ride, what a great story, what an immersive experience. And I think we approach it that way. I know Electrosonic approaches it that way. It's always in support of the guest experience. And there have been some extraordinary innovations over the last 20 years. Many of them are technology based and many of them aren't. If you go back and look at Harry Potter as a land again at Islands of Adventure, and we talk about that, the innovations there are both technological and non-technological. The level of investment to achieve the immersion in that space, the cohesion of the environments in terms of selling you that you're in that world is an achievement that really is not an obvious technology solution. It's about creativity and chutzpah to do it. The technology that is involved in that behind the scenes, the guest will never even see because it's often, in the construction side. And then you get to the attraction, and there's a high level of new technology there with the KUKA arm and all the stuff that Dynamic did and Universal did to make that happen. Huge technological achievement, a huge leap forward. So these things are always working hand in hand. We're always looking at how to innovate just in terms of the guest experience, regardless of technology. But in the end, technology does enable us to make better experiences. I think we look at the cost of being able to do a lot of things. People can't afford what Disney and Universal can do. And technology over time does become cheaper and more accessible. And that's where it's fun to sit down with folks like Les and Electrosonic and say, hey, we have this idea for this new display. We have this idea for this new video thingamajig. How can we get this done? And thinking it may be impossible to achieve, but then end up being really surprised when they come in with some pretty innovative solutions.
Yeah, the impossible is fun to do, isn't it? Some of the most memorable things that I can recall in Harry Potter, for instance, uses 100-year-old technology. When you think of the Pepper's ghost effects in the queue with Dumbledore's office, that's a century-old technology. I recall a project we did at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, where we did rear projection layers on scrims and give that kind of theatrical look of 3 dimensions with sets in the foreground and then these layers of rear projection in the background. So I don't think it needs to be new technology. It's actually the way that you use it, and I think that's where one of our strong points is figuring out new ways to use existing type technologies to create new experiences.
So now let's intersect COVID to the conversation as well. Most folks want to be done chatting COVID, but of course there are going to be some long-term ramifications, from the last year. So I'm curious what you see those being. Where do you see park design going from here? With all of these larger technology trends and storytelling trends in mind, now that COVID is more or less behind the industry, or at least not actively shaping, a ton of the most innovative decision making for the attractions industry. Where does COVID and the COVID context intersect with these larger trends, in your opinion?
That's an interesting hypothesis. I'm not sure that we're ever going to be rid of COVID. Of course, I'm not Dr. Fauci by any means, but I think it's always going to be in the back of mind. So when I take my family anywhere, I'm always going to have that little voice in the back of my head saying, be safe. And so I would always expect visiting these places to have your temperature taken. I'd always expect to have the sanitation stations at every attraction and at the entrance to every restaurant, and expect them to wipe down the seats and that kind of thing. I think that's going to be with us for the foreseeable future.
We work with a lot of owners, operators, obviously, and they really run the gamut in terms of their plans for the future. Some are just planning on going back to normal eventually, and everything will return to the way they were. And for all the things Les would love to see, they're talking about not doing all that cleaning and not having that additional staff and expense, and returning to the density that attractions and parks once had. We have other clients that are saying the future may always look like this. So we have to plan in the development stages for less density of people, which requires more area, right? If you have a queue that needs 500 people and the people have to be spaced out, that queue gets bigger. That box, that building gets bigger. And also a lot of trends in terms of technology, like touch screens. A lot of interactivity involves physical touch. And if we are saying we don't want to have to touch things anymore, that changes the dynamic of how a guest interacts with some kind of interactive. You're not turning a knob, you're not touching a screen, you're not sliding a slider, whatever the case may be. And so Thinkwell's technology team up in Montreal are developing a variety of touchless solutions, and also looking at ways that you can mirror that interactive on your phone seamlessly, so that you touch your own device in order to interact with that existing interactive device. So those are things that I would say are trends that we're going to see continue on into the future, regardless of COVID, just like I now expect to be able to get food delivered from my favorite restaurant anytime I want, I think I'm also going to expect to have some of these safety measures in place when I go out in public and pay a ticket to go to an experience.
I'm kind of an optimist at heart, and I think that technology will fill the gap. And certainly there are technologies that fill this void where you have you can use gestures on what were previously touch screens, right? There are screens that you will come up to at the entrance to the venue that will measure your temperature automatically and record it. So they have a record of Craig visiting this venue at this date, and his temperature was this much. And maybe that kind of information is stored for legal reasons. But there's certainly technology coming along now that will fill these voids that were available.
Craig, Les, it's really been a pleasure chatting so far. I've only got a few questions left for you, but let's go ahead and intersect this collaborative theme that we started the conversation with. How do you see the collaboration, again, whether that's person to person, company to company, or industry to industry, being a major factor for success or for innovation in the attractions industry moving forward? And again, feel free to pull from your own experiences and how collaboration has elevated the projects you've worked on. But again, offer sort of your insights there and how you see that shaping the successes of projects moving forward.
What I see, Daniel, is that many of us in the industry, as either individuals or as companies, have very focused core competencies. And in order to create compelling experiences, you bring together a bunch of these individuals and companies, and you create a synergy. So all of the various parts put together make a more engaging whole. And I think that what Electrosonic brings is focused on the technology side of things. There are a great many other companies in the IAPA and the TEA universe who have complementary skills. We all know each other. We work together on various projects, and I think that that's the way that projects get done. We're always we have this I think a common philosophy. This philosophy of the show must go on type of thing. I know that many of us in the industry have that philosophy, and working together, I think collaboratively produces these wonderful attractions like we've been talking about today.
I would have to agree with Les, and I would add to that. One of the things that I tell students all the time when I talk to them about getting into this business is you have to get along with people and you have to like to collaborate. For me as a creative director, I have to fully bake an idea in my head in order to communicate it with others. And so for me, my ego creatively says that idea is perfect. But then you also have to be willing and able to open yourself up to suggestion, and that is part of the collaborative process. I may think that thing is perfect, but then an art director might come in and suggest something. A lighting designer might come in and suggest something that I don't even know about. A technology company like Electrosonic can throw out 3 or 4 things and say, have you thought about doing it this way? And that thing that I thought was the best thing and the perfect thing gets a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And if you're not open to that collaboration, you're not going to achieve the best possible thing. But I think the magic of our industry, and it's really only found in a few other places in terms of creativity, probably theater, television, film, the magic is in having that thing that you thought was perfect become more perfect, become even better. And I love the collaborative process. I love rolling up my sleeves with all the disciplines and saying, let's look at this problem together. Let's tackle it. What have you got? Let's make it awesome. And that's the fun of what we do.
And then last but not least, as we come out of COVID, I'm curious what both of you are excited about within the attractions industry. Anything really capturing your attention, or are there any specific types or attractions themselves that you're excited to visit as end users or as professionals wanting to just learn something from your colleagues? So again, what are you excited about from the industry that you're ready to get back to, and why?
Well, we've been working on the Beijing Universal project for a number of years, and I'm excited to go and visit that, not only to see the attractions that we're very familiar with, but also the new attractions that they have. And I'm also excited to visit the Avengers that Craig mentioned earlier. That's another project that we've spent some time on. And for folks that haven't visited Orlando, you really need to see the Bourne Stuntacular at Universal. It's an amazing attraction, and it doesn't just push the boundaries of stunt shows. It leaves me as a jaded theme park geek wondering how they do it. It's just an astonishing attraction, and I can see that it's going to lead to even more attractions that are based on that type of stagecraft.
I have to agree with Les. Like, COVID has forced us all to watch YouTube videos of our favorite things, and the Bourne attraction was one of the things when I saw it online, I said I've got to go see that in person. And that's one of the things I'm personally really excited about checking out. Obviously, we've talked about Nintendo and Avengers Campus at California Adventure. Both things definitely don't want to miss. And then randomly, there's some other really interesting things. I'm a huge Black Mirror fan. I don't know if you watch Black Mirror on Netflix, but love that show. Thorpe Park in the UK has just opened a new walkthrough attraction based on Black Mirror, which I'm really excited about. Have to get to Vegas to see the newest and latest things that have opened there. And then randomly, Cedar Valley's Wild Frontier Fun Park has opened a thing that I have talked about for 25 years wanting to do, which is a roller coaster that literally jumps the track, disengages with the track, and becomes a boat. Like, that's unbelievable to me. And I have to go check this out at some point. So these are the things that I'm excited to get out and do in the real world again, now that things are starting to open up.
Come and see us while you're here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to need to check out that Black Mirror install, because I also love that show, and I could go for some dystopian entertainment, as if we didn't get enough of it over the last year, right?
Right.
No, but I agree. I mean, it's exciting to hear both of y'all and your storied careers in the industry. It's been a real pleasure to connect the dots between the past and the future of the industry. And hey, I'm not going to take your recommendations lightly. So now I've got a list of attractions to go check out here soon. But I think we're reaching the end of the conversation. So thank you so much to both of you. It's really been a pleasure, again, chatting and pulling from your backgrounds in the industry to better understand where the industry is going post-COVID and how that core focus on collaboration, whether that's interpersonal or at a large scale, is going to guide the industry forward. So thank you again to our two guests, Les Hill, Senior Account Manager at Electrosonic, and Craig Hanna, Co-founder and Chief Creative Officer at Thinkwell Group. Les, if folks want to find out more about your work or some of the work that Electrosonic is doing in this space, how can they learn more and how can they get in touch?
Well, you can call my cell or
All right, we're handing out cell phone numbers on the podcast now.
No, I'm just that was just humor. You can check out our website, electrosonic.com, or you can contact me personally, les.hill@electrosonic.com. That's HILL.
Perfect. Les, thank you again. And Craig, same question to you. If folks want to find out more about some of the work that Thinkwell Group is doing in the space, or they want to get in touch, how can they do so?
The simple thing to do is to just go to thinkwellgroup.com. Don't go to thinkwell.com. That's a textbook company in Texas. So go to thinkwellgroup.com, and there'll be a contact us link there, and you can get in touch with us. We respond real fast. Or check us out on social media, whether that's LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We're all over that with the latest news and updates on what we're doing.
If you find yourself learning about engaging history from a textbook and not from a live attraction, then you might be at the wrong Thinkwell.
Exactly.
I love it. All right, Craig, thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure having you on Electrosonic's show. Les, thank you as well for joining us. And I'm sure we'll have you both back on soon. So chat soon.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. See ya.
And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Fusion, an Electrosonic podcast. If you like what you heard and want to listen to previous episodes, make sure you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And again, for more episodes of Fusion or for more Electrosonic content, head to our website, electrosonic.com. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B. Till next time.